Welcome, welcome, everybody. I'm so excited to have this panel discussion. My name is Corinne Pompey. I'm the program coordinator at Woman Made Gallery. Um, and just to give you some background, just in case you're not familiar, we're a nonprofit organization. Since 1992, when we were founded by Kelly Hansen and Beata Minkowski, we've shown the work of more than 10,000 artists in almost 500 exhibitions. So we're really proud of that. We're gonna keep going strong. To give you guys a brief overview of what we're going to be talking about today, the 26th International Open is an annual exhibition that saw entries in all mediums from around the world. This year, we received about 200 submissions that our lovely juror, Savneet Talwar, had the pleasure of sorting through. In the end, she selected works by 40 artists in total from across the US, China, the UK, Italy, and Qatar. For those who don't know, the show closes on March 29th, which is this Saturday. So if you haven't seen it, run and go see it. It's a really, really cool show. And then can also see the virtual exhibition on our website. So, who is this amazing woman, you ask? I'll tell you. Savneet Talwar, I'm so excited to be in conversation with her. She's the juror of our show and an artist in her own right. She's a Chicago-based scholar, fiber artist, educator, and art therapist, and currently teaches at the School of the Art Institute in Chicago. Her work explores archives, memory, feminist politics, and resistance, and we are so excited to have her here with us. And just to give you some more background about our panelists, Boisali Biswas, she is a mixed media fiber artist in Michigan. Give a wave, give a wave. Perfect. She's originally from India, like I said, living in Sh Michigan right now. She earned her BFA at Vishva Bharati University.
Right.
I'm saying it
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. And her MFA at Bowling Green State. Her work blends Western and Indian influences, creating unique multicultural pieces. She's exhibited nationally and internationally, and her work was recently featured in Textile Fiber Forum and will be included in Fiber Art International. Next up, we have Wendy L Starn. Yay, we got a wave. She is a fiber artist with degrees from Syracuse University and the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, and additional study at the Savannah College of Art and Design. Her work explores the natural environment, political themes, color, and geometry, often incorporating techniques like quilting, painting, and dyeing. Her work has been exhibited nationally and is part of collections like the Alexandria Museum of Art. And we're so excited to have you as well. Next, we have Holly Willis. Um, she is a writer, filmmaker, and photographer whose work explores the materiality of the image through new materialist philosophy and the histories of experimental film, video, and photography. Her work challenges how we engage with the world and its landscapes, considering our connections to the matter around us. She's also the author of books like Fast Forward, The Future of the Cinematic Arts and New Digital Cinema, and she frequently writes for publications such as Film Comment and Variety. All right, I'm so excited to have all you guys here. As I mentioned before, this exhibition brought in about 200 submissions from all over the world. So rightfully so, a show like this draws attention to the diversity of artists and perspectives represented, right? So I'm going to turn this over to Savneet, our juror, and ask if you can kind of talk to us about your experience going through all of these submissions, and what, if anything, stood out to you.
Thank you, Corinne, for your introduction and talking us a little bit through Women Made Gallery and what your mission is. It's been such an honor to work with all of you and really walk me through some of the processes through which, I had to do the juring process. Juring online is so different. But that said, I want to start by congratulating all the artists on this amazing show. I know the artists that are here today. Let me just say first, all the works that I selected were absolutely spectacular. And so I feel that it was such an honor for me to jury this show. But it was also a real challenge to jury this show. Um, Given that it was an international show, we got so many submissions, and I was so intrigued by the submissions because they came from across the world. And it really added to a narrative around feminist methodologies, right? The art process as a way for us to really be speaking about our own cultural history, what we inherit, political issues. So it's a combination of a lot of different narratives that have come together. So as Corinne said, we got over 200 works, and there were an incredible, outstanding works. Some of the works that I was unable to, like some of the works that I would have loved to show, but we didn't either have the space, and then we were limited in terms, it was challenging in terms of the space, what we could select and what we could not. But as a juror, I feel that I was looking to create a show that really created sort of relationships amongst the different art pieces that were there. And you can see some of these pieces, and I know some of the artists who are here today will be talking about this. Um, and for me, as an artist and a scholar, I'm always interested in looking at different methodologies, especially around how the needle is used, what kind of skills people are using. As a fiber artist myself, the needle is a very important piece. But that said, the works in this show are really varied. So I was really looking at how the works were really speaking either from a cultural history perspective, um, and that explored kind of feminist ideas as well as intersectionality in sort of creating a narrative that spoke maybe from a personal perspective, from a social perspective, for some from a social perspective, and some from a political perspective. So I think the three artists that we have selected today who will be speaking will kind of give you an idea of all of these different pieces of the personal, the social, and the political. Um, I really found myself drawn to both skills, but also the ways in which the pieces explored the concept of the domestic sphere, especially around history and memory, that creative process, and how this was all speaking from a global feminist context. And so it was really I was really looking for how to create a show that spoke to each other and created an interconnectedness of narratives. Um, so as I was selecting also there were other ideas also, certainly like I've spoken about the material concepts, the conceptual boundaries, especially looking in, there are some pieces that very specifically speak to the very personal aspect of spaces, but also to other public aspect of spaces that women and non-gender and gender non-binary artists navigate all the time. So as you can see, there's a range of pieces here, from painting, weaving, embroidery, sculpture, photography, to collage, painting, and video. So with that said, I want to say that this was an absolute joy for me to participate as a juror in this show. Um, and I want to say congratulations to all the artists and those who are here today. I'm really happy that you all are here. I wanted everybody to be on this panel to talk. We had to make certain decisions. So I just want to know if I want everybody to know what an honor it was for me to select your pieces and now get to hear some of the artists' own thoughts around their creative process.
Yes, thank you so much, Savneet. Yeah, it's really amazing to see so many different mediums come together in one space. That's something that a lot of visitors will comment on when they come through the gallery. So yeah, a job well done. Thank you so much. So now I'd like to shift our focus to the featured artists. I'd love for each of you to kind of share a bit about your piece in the show and provide some background about your creative process. I think let's start with Holly. Do you mind starting us off?
No, thank you. First, I want to just say how honored I am to be included in the show. It was really a thrill to get the acceptance, and then to see the body of work and to read everyone's statements. I feel just so humbled by the work and really excited to be here today. And I'll just say, with this particular project, I began working with a scanner, and I had been scanning things that I found in Northern California on long walks in the woods. I kind of got out of LA for a few days over the holidays and really delighted in the way the scanner kind of makes objects look a little bit strange and uncanny. Rather than taking a photograph, a scanner kind of moves slowly across the scanner bed and captures an image in a process that takes 3 or 4 seconds. And I really enjoyed just sort of seeing the strangeness of things like mushrooms or branches or acorns. And then at a certain point, I scanned my hand and it looked so strange and familiar, but strange and kind of distorted. And I did what so many people do with Xerox machines. I didn't sit on it, but I laid my head on the scanner and began scanning my hair and my hands and took a lot of scans across a couple of hours, just playing with the kind of textures and the strangeness and thinking about time and the way the scanner lets an image kind of grow or become something over several seconds, which is different than a photograph where you just snap a picture and it kind of feels very instant and almost violent, like you're capturing something. And this sort of slows it down and it allows for time and movement. And I felt myself breathing and kind of moving with the scanner, which then would create an even more uncanny image. And I guess what I liked about the uncanniness was that it captured my own sense of self at this moment of my life, sort of moving from middle age to older age, and kind of finding myself surprised by how I look and the strangeness of my skin and how it feels and the strangeness of my hair, which is turning colors. And it just kind of captured that sense of unfamiliarity that I have with my own body at certain points, but also kind of let me come closer to it in a way. And I guess to say how this fits in a larger body of work or a practice, I would say that I'm become more and more interested in things that are kind of elemental. I think I used to hope that my practice would become increasingly sophisticated and I would get better and better. But I found that I'm now kind of returning to the elemental, to things like color and to texture and to time and to language. And I feel that it kind of is taking me out of the day-to-day kind of drama and into things that feel more expansive and spacious and I don't know, connected to an elemental sensibility. And I'm also, I think, really drawn to the ways that the tools and the things that I'm interacting with have their own sense of life and vibrancy, and trying to connect with that rather than being an artist who exerts some kind of transcendent power over materials. I'm just kind of stepping back and opening to what might be possible in the interaction and the exchange. And I feel like the scanner kind of lets me do that. It's sort of like this weird interaction where we're both moving and the light is creating something, but I'm not fully in charge, nor is the scanner fully in charge. So, yeah, so I hope that gives you a little bit of a sense of the project.
Yeah, definitely. That was an awesome description of what's going on here. Thank you so much. Um, Now let's hear from Wendy.
Okay, this quilt started to be put together. It's fiber art, but it's quilted in this particular instance. And I started to put this together very shortly after the Dobbs decision was made public, which is the decision by the Supreme Court that canceled Roe v. Wade. It's stent. I took light gray fabric, clamped it to a table after I had drawn some rules on it, like ledger lines, like you would use for a child learning to write. And it took quite a while to stencil all this. It's all stenciled with washable school glue, and then the stenciled area was painted with black paint, which kind of left it looking a little bit like cut stone. And after a few more processes, I took a perfectly finished piece of fabric and cut it up, slashed it, and added the red X. Um, The words on it, which are probably a little hard to read from here: equality, gun safety, bodily autonomy, voting rights, endangered species, freedom of expression, consumer protection, asylum, privacy rights, church separated from state, civil and human rights, national parks, clean air and water, equal opportunity, money out of politics. All of these things either are gone at this point or are extremely endangered. And of course, the Supreme Court has the final say, and the way they're going, we could be losing even more of our rights that I've had my entire adult life, but my daughter does not have, and her daughter will not have. So that's kind of how that was made. This is not the only political artwork I've made. I've made quite a few others on everything from wetlands being endangered to January 6th to gun violence to poverty to immigration, etc. I could go on. I do work in other genres because you can't do this stuff all the time. It would make you just really depressed. But I have gotten into really using a lot of language. The piece behind me is also words, but they're done in completely different techniques. And I've also quilted words in, I've stenciled, I've painted, I've pieced them together. I do seem to have a lot to say, especially since I retired, and I don't have to worry about saying something that will get me fired. I've done quite a bit of surface design. This piece has surface design in the glue resist, and I've also done paint and printing and stamping and anything else. Not everything I make is quilted. I have a piece about gun violence that is not quilted, that is in a museum, and several of my other pieces are not quilted. But I like this medium. It's a soft medium that you can use to tell hard truths.
Awesome. Thank you, Wendy. Boisali, would you like to give us some background?
First of thank you very much for selecting my work, Savneet. I was really humbled and honored, and more humbled when I was selected for this panel, I guess, among 50 artists or whatever. I was really honored about that. And it's a real privilege to be able to speak about my work, because I feel always a body of work speaks about an artist a lot more than just one piece. And so just being able to talk about your work, it talks about your practice basically, and lets you know about my practice of how I work in my studio. So yeah, I have been in this country, like, I don't know how about Sanveet, but I have been here for over 30 years now. And I have always, like, fibers is my favorite medium, and I work in all kinds of techniques, that whatever I can get my hands on. I love to play with fabrics, like ready-made fabrics, and dye it and print and do all kinds of things to it. As well as I like to play on my loom too. I love the intersection of yarns, like of the warp and weft. So before I go on and off with the techniques, like I move around with the techniques a lot. Before I used to do a lot of surface design, and recently, like past 5 or 6 years, I have been weaving a lot more, I notice. Before I used to combine my fabrics with my weavings and do assemblages like thing. But recently I have been doing more of weaving, and I have been concentrating on translucent weaving basically. So my more and more my weavings are translucent weaving. And I don't know if I mentioned it in my statement, that I'm really intrigued by jamdani. That's a real traditional technique of India and Bangladesh. And I've always just loved it. I don't know why. It's just a very simple inlay technique. You don't need a very fancy loom or anything. But the Jamdani fabrics are just ethereal, just they are so beautiful. So I have always incorporated that simple technique in my work, but I never used to really focus on the translucency of my weaving. Recently, I have been doing that, and I don't want to obviously recreate what the weavers do over there with Jamdani because that's something I cannot do. They're just fantastic artisans, and I have so much respect for them. So all I'm doing is I'm using their technique, the simple inlay technique in the weaving. So more and more, I really can't use those real fine yarns. I am not capable of doing that. So I'm using the finest yarn that I can and weaving very lightweight fabrics so that they are translucent in a sense, but the inlays are producing beautiful shadows um, when we have the right light on them. So this particular work, and I took advantage of, the weavers in India, they weave on basic two-shaft looms, and which are very basic and primitive. But I don't have very fancy looms, but I have a four-shaft loom. So I took advantage of that, and I tried to create some designs instead of just the plain weave. So that was my addition to Jamdani, but the technique was basically the same. And what I do is I've lived here so many years, but still I'm a very Indian at heart. I lived there, like half of my soul lives there most of the time. So this whole journey took me to reminiscing about my home country and bringing back those childhood motifs and images and all those. Whenever I think of India, Sanvit would be able to relate to this. I see clotheslines everywhere, and that simple metaphor came into my work. So with this work, I was like, as if I was writing in a journal, but I had so much to say, and I couldn't obviously do it in weaving, like write all that. So to me, it was like the shadows were giving an ambiguous feel to my feelings, to just the images were giving I felt it was like writing a journal, and with proper lighting you can see that it creates like almost calligraphic effect. That's why I call it asemic writing. And this is a work in progress and a project in progress, and I'm going to work more and more on it. I go back on my concepts and the themes. For a while, I was working on just reminiscing on my home country, and I did a whole series, and I had a solo show last year, um, recreating some of my images that kind of stuck with me. Whenever I think of India, whatever sticks with me, like those images came into my work, and I tried to do it with Jamdani or very light applique with very sheer fabric. So I feel like as we are aging, it's like lot of layers. We have lot of layers in our thought process and in our life in general. So more and more I'm working with layers. This is a piece where I have just one single weaving in it, but some of them are very complex, and I'm making components which can be switched from one piece to the other. Like I have in some pieces, I have a translucent balcony which can be used from one piece to the other. I have ceiling fans, a clothesline. So they're very narrative and things that have stuck in my mind. So this is basically one of a series where I want to write with my weaving, and the shadows will really reflect that ambiguous statement or writing of my work. I don't know if I could really clarify things, but yeah, that's pretty much my journey right now.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
You're
Yes,
welcome.
Savneet.
Yeah, I just had one question for you, Boisali. What is the yarn that you're using?
I'm using this one particularly has rayon and cotton, but recently I've started using linen because it has more body to it. And I've also started incorporating actually wire. I'm weaving with wire as the weft, so that way I'm making them more sculptural. But I'm still using the jamdani technique, and I'm using wires which I can make sculptural, and maybe I'll enter some of those pieces in future shows, but that's still in the process of, yeah, I'm still playing with that, but I think I'm going to switch to linen.
Thank you.
And oh, I painted the warp before I started doing that. Before I put the yarn onto the loom, the warp, I painted. So that gives me the real beautiful colors.
Awesome. Thank you so much for giving us that background.
You're welcome.
So I know after hearing all three of you talk about your work, it's evident that for all of you, materiality is very important, you know? So I'd love to dive into that more in terms of expressing cultural heritage and traditions. So specifically, Boisali, as you were mentioning, your work uses traditional Jamdani weaving to convey
Mhm.
cultural identity and memory. Wendy, your work uses traditional fiber techniques while exploring contemporary social and other political issues. So I want to ask both of you, how do each of your backgrounds, whether it be cultural or traditional, influence the way in which you create and then think about art in general? Whoever wants to go first.
Wendy, you can go ahead. Wendy, you want to go ahead?
Oh, okay. I've been sewing since I was little, and I did start making quilts when I had my first child, and then didn't make any for a while because I was running around after two small children. Um, but I've almost never made a bed quilt. The only bed quilts I've made were for my granddaughter. So, from the beginning, they were always going to be wall pieces that turned into more art than just a wall piece. So, I don't know. I kind of take the quilt making tradition and then do my own thing with it. And there are times where I'll put a traditional pattern in something, but it's not a traditional quilt. There's numerous little blocks that you see the Quilt Guild ladies use, but I don't really use those much. I do have another piece where I designed my own block, only it looks very pretty in pink and white from a distance until you realize that the block is a stylized set of lady parts. So yeah, I kind of like to take tradition and turn it a little sideways, I guess. All in the name of self-expression and having my voice out there. I reach far more people in an exhibit than I would if I went and stood in front of City Hall here with a little sign. And I don't get spit on or anything either that way. So yeah, if I can have a quilt that expresses my point of view and it goes to QuiltCon or some other big venue, many more people will see that way. So it's a way to get my voice out there in the world and just express my thoughts and go from there. Try to attract a little attention, catch somebody, and maybe make them think.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Boisali, do you want to jump off of that?
Yeah, just like Wendy, even I have made quilts, but mostly I'm so thankful for art quilts because I've never taken classes in traditional quilting so that I could just be my free self and do whatever I want to with the fabrics. So most of my quilts have been like one piece quilt. And as for the weaving too, Jamdani, like I said, Jamdani, I just love the results of Jamdani, but I wanted to use it in a contemporary context, basically, not the traditional Jamdani weaving. So someone who knows about weaving would be able to identify that, oh yes, she is using Jamdani, but if you don't know about the inlays, maybe you would not even notice it. But yes, I'm trying to use those traditional things. Even I love ikat. I'm trying to get a different effect of ikat, not the traditional type, with painting my work. And I think I'm using the traditional techniques that way in a more contemporary way. So I don't know if that answers your question, but uh, yeah, and yeah, like my work is not political as Wendy's, which I'd love to do sometime, but as an immigrant, you have to be careful too. I was just,
Yeah.
right now I was just my kids have been very vocal about the genocide and everything, but we have to be cautious being here. So yeah, so that's something, even if I want to portray in my work, I'm really a little cautious about it.
Yeah, yeah, I think we can all begin to understand that, you know. I think that in all of your works, there's a balance of utilizing traditional techniques and then pushing the boundaries to
Yeah.
get your message across. So Holly, I'd love to bring you into this conversation. You're a photographer, but you're using a flatbed scanner to make pictures, you know? So do you feel, you kind of touched on this a little bit, but do you feel that scanning gets your message across more accurately than a photo would?
I think what's interesting to me about scanning is that it's almost a misuse of the scanner and a sort of improper deployment of a tool that's meant for kind of capturing things um, perfectly. And instead, I like to kind of mess with that and create imperfection and kind of push against sort of ideas of kind of what the image should be or is supposed to look like. So in some ways, I feel like I'm really pushing against the technology itself, while at the same time working with it and enjoying it, the qualities that it brings forward, these ideas of time and of motion that aren't really usually part of a photograph. So I think that that's kind of what draws me to that particular thing. But in general, I would say that I am more interested in kind of disrupting the tools that I'm using and kind of misusing them and trying to find other capacities rather than sort of doing what's expected. I've had much more luck in my own practice in kind of resistance and almost kind of pushing against what a photograph, especially in a context where, you know, photography is often so much connected to power and to representation and to issues of class and gender and race. And being able to sort of say no to that feels very empowering to me as a maker. And I hope maybe opens up a space for different kinds of images to be shared.
Yeah, yeah. As a photographer myself, I can definitely appreciate that notion. Thanks for sharing that. I'd love to kind of touch on this. Oh yeah, Savneet, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a couple of comments, and this is just all to support the work and what people have been talking about, and especially Holly, when you were talking. What came to my mind was that even though aging, especially women and women's aging and all kinds of issues around that are such a feminist issue, there's so little written about it, right? So I think that I really liked when you were speaking specifically about this place of the strange and the familiar, and that there is I'm hoping that there will be more that is going to emerge out of this work, and also for some more written material around this work around intersectionality and women, and especially gender and aging, and how some of that stuff has been overlooked so much. So I really appreciated that part of your work, and the use of technology as because more often we say that as people age, they'll give up technology. So I like that juxtapositioning positioning as well. And again, for Wendy, your work I thought is really interesting, as in the fact that, you know, I teach a class in which we make protest banners. I know that the work that goes into quilting is so much more. And so I was really interested in this cultural heritage that you have, embraced, because quilting is something that a lot of people, I should say a lot of people, but something that is very akin to families and family traditions. And just in the same way as Boshali, you've been talking about how Jamdani as the memory of Jamdani is there, but how you interpret it is very different. So I really like the connections everybody's been making here. So I just wanted to throw out a couple of my observations as the panel is continuing. So I'll send it back to you for further questions, Corinne.
Awesome. Thank you, Savneet. I want to kind of focus on memory history as a theme right now. I'm going to turn to Wendy and Holly when I talk about this specifically, and Boisali, I think you'll have some things to add too. But both of you tackle deeply personal and also political themes in your work, right? Whether it's the intimate reflections on aging, as we see in Holly's work, or the political narratives in fiber art with Wendy's. I would like to know how each of you kind of navigate that sense of responsibility that comes in addressing these complex topics, while also, ensuring that your message prompts viewers to reflect and connect with your piece, if that makes sense. Whoever wants to start us off. I'm gonna choose one. Wendy, why don't you start us?
Uh, I don't I don't know whether responsibility is the right word. A lot of the time, these pieces simply demand to be made.
Mm.
Like, I have no choice. It's got to exist. And then, of course, what I do after it exists is send it out and see how many shows I can get it in. Well, how else do you get your message out? What my primary interest is eyeballs, hearts, and minds. So yeah, a lot of the time, I made a piece on retribution earlier, I guess last year now. And it was because of all the stuff I was hearing on the news. And the piece that I just finished in January, I didn't have plans for it to be about this, but it ended up being about immigration. My plans were to make a quilt that used the 20 or so gloves I found when we were cleaning out my mother's house, some of which had pairs and some of which did not. And they're not in good enough shape to use as to actually wear, but I thought those would be cool to put on a quilt. And it ended up that they're all reaching for things like democracy and equality and freedom and other things like that. And people could read into it what they want, but my artist statement is straight off the base of the Statue of Liberty. So yeah, I don't do history as much as current events. And what I see on the news just drives me to make things to say about it.
Thank you.
So,
Holly, do you want to jump off of that?
Sure. I would agree with Wendy that I didn't feel a sense of responsibility when I was making the series of scans. I felt like I was really moving inward and not thinking about things outside. And I think the confrontation was really with my own sense of self, and that was enough. Like dealing with just my own hesitations about, making an image based on myself. So I felt like it was very interior, and it was only when I sent the image out that I began to think about how it might be seen or experienced in a larger context. And I was curious about whether it would be recognized, whether it would be accepted somewhere, whether it would be appeal to anyone. I really wasn't sure. So I was obviously thrilled that it, the first place I sent it, it was accepted. And that was very exciting, but also affirming in a way that the message that I was trying to communicate somehow was being received, and received in this particular environment was really empowering. And I think what Savneet was saying earlier is even more encouragement to continue with the work and to think about it a little bit more deeply, and to think about how else to broach this topic and to kind of push it further. How else might we talk about this and the complexity of all of it? The full array of feelings, both personally, but also kind of in a community and then culturally, and sort of where we share connections as women in this process and where those connections maybe are radically different, and recognizing all of that and how complex it is for each of us navigating this transition.
Yeah, definitely. Boisali, do you have anything to add to this prompt?
Something just came over. I thought I wanted to mention that, like I mentioned, my clotheslines, it was a very simple metaphor. That to me was very a powerful way of connecting the women of the world, basically. And I did a piece called Bonded Through Threaded Memories, because the little travels that we have done to different countries, I was just so intrigued that it's a very common metaphor that grandmothers and mothers, they dry clothes on the clothesline, and it's kind of they're nurturing their families or the traditions and the cultural connections, like that was like that's how I felt like I could connect the women of the world. And it's also, we are all connected basically, even though we belong to these different countries. So, yeah, that was just a very simple yet very powerful metaphor for me, like bringing in Jamdani that way.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm so glad that all of you are kind of touching on this topic of connectedness and also intention in your work. I think as artists, there are moments when we create with a clear, specific intention, and then other times our work kind of evolves organically without a fixed purpose in mind, which is what you all are kind of touching on. Um, we find that the process itself can often be as revealing as the final piece, right? So, given this and all the personal themes that all of you are exploring, I'm curious as to how important it is to you that viewers understand your personal intention. Or do you prefer to leave space for them to find their own meaning? Who wants to start? Mhm.
Um, Yeah, I feel it is important to for viewers to connect, but I like to give them space too. But I think it is very rewarding when people can really connect to your piece, or
Yeah.
like in few of my solo shows, I have had people commenting that they were transported to a different world, to their childhood, and that was very rewarding to me, and it was just wonderful to hear that like they could connect to their past and to their childhood or whatever through my work. So yeah, that was very fulfilling to me, and I love when that happens. It's not that I'm doing it very intentionally, but I love to hear people getting that connection, finding that connection, and that's really worthwhile to me.
Yeah, that's what we want as artists, right? I
Oh
love
yes.
Holly, do you want to go next?
Sure. I think for me, I would echo what Boisali was saying. I feel like hopefully the encounter will allow people to have their own feeling and kind of experience the work as they see it. The first person to respond to it, other than my partner, was the person who was printing the image so I could send it, and he said, Wow, that's weird. So that was his first take, and he thought that the extra hand there was a mistake and that it might need to be fixed. So that was interesting to me that he was seeing it in that context. And um, I'm hoping that when it was encountered in the show, that there was a recognition that the errors were intentional, that there's a kind of stretching of time and the body and the hair in this very strange way, but it's not immediately recognizable. So I'm hoping that there's in that space of a kind of similar to what I feel, kind of recognition, but also as there's something wrong or strange or different or uncanny about this image. If people know about the scanner, that's great, but I feel like that's really a secondary story to the initial impact I hope people experience in seeing it and finding it feeling a little strange.
Yeah, Holly, I want to add on to that. A couple weeks ago when I was at the gallery, there was a woman and her mother came in, and they were looking around the gallery, and the daughter came across your piece, and her mom was across the gallery, and she said, "Mom, come here, this looks like you." And they had this like really sweet moment. So yeah, I think that even if people don't already recognize that it's scanning. They recognize, gray hair, silver hair, the hand, there's things there to connect with. So I just wanted to give you that sentiment.
Thank you. That's really
Thank
sweet.
you.
Wendy, would you like to chime in here?
Yeah, it depends on the piece how important it is. Although I have some pieces where they're deceptive, they look, pretty or beautiful at first glance, and then when you get closer, you realize what's going on. Now the one in the gallery, the red X is kind of an attention getter there. You cannot miss that, but
Yeah.
it's not until you start reading the words that you realize what's going on. So, it may start out a little more subtle or not, but it takes a little bit to, and of course, all this stuff is everybody is open, everything is open to interpretation because no two people have the same life experiences that they bring to it. So to some degree, interpretation is always going to be subjective. For my work, I think the tactile quality kind of draws people in. The quilting and fiber, of course, is traditionally quote unquote women's work. It's gotten easier to get into shows in recent years, but there have been shows in the past that only wanted watercolor and painting and sculpture, and that especially conservative male jurors would just look at what I was doing and go, "Oh, women's work, we don't want that." Um, Quilting, however, has been political since it started. There have always been political quilts, which comes up every time somebody decides that they're miffed that everything isn't all sweetness and light and pretty.
Mm.
Um, so I don't know. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. Um, I let's see here. Sorry. Um, okay, yeah, thank you all for sharing that. I think I want to move into um how we navigate this relationship with our heritage, right? How we've kind of touched on this a bit, but how do we kind of, for those of you working with techniques rooted in cultural history, how do you navigate the tension between honoring your heritage and then pushing the boundaries of traditional techniques? Wendy, we've heard from you about this. Boisali, I'd love to hear kind of your thoughts on that.
For me, it's not, I don't have any tension about it, I think.
Okay.
It just comes very naturally, I think. My heritage and whatever, like I grew up amongst fabrics. Our country is so rich in fabrics. Whenever I'm working, all those like flood my mind. So for me, tradition and pushing boundaries in contemporary art it comes very naturally, I think. I think there are a lot of artisans, real skilled artisans over there to continue the traditions that our country possesses. So for me, kind of taking some of those techniques and some of those ideas and then pushing boundaries into contemporary art is very natural. It comes like I don't have any tension about that. Like I don't really care if anyone really understands what I'm taking from my heritage or not, but to me it is important. I take it, and to me that's all that matters. Like someone, if they hear of that I use jamdani, might be looking for jamdani motifs, which are very common in my work, and they might say, oh, she doesn't, where is the jamdani? It doesn't look like jamdani. But to me, I know I'm using the technique, and that's all that matters. And I'm ready to push boundaries doing that. So that's why I'm using wire now, and the shadows created by the jamdani with these sculptures are so interesting for me. So that's something that I'm doing now. So I'm always ready to like push boundaries into the contemporary um, part of it and just use those techniques. And that's where I bring in those traditions. I don't
I
know.
love that. That's artistic expression at its finest, you know?
Yeah.
So, as our kind of closing question, I want to ask all of our panelists for a piece of advice for those who might be watching. So, for artists who are exploring their cultural roots or traditional mediums with their work, what advice would you offer to those beginning this journey or feeling unsure about how to connect with those deeper themes?
Um, for for me, I think if it comes naturally, let it come. Like not all people feel connected to their tradition, and they want to bring those things in their work. But if you feel connected and if it comes naturally, if the flow is natural, just let it come and go from there. It's not that we are not responsible or we are not really indebted to our traditions, but if someone wants to do it, let them do it. It's the freedom of artists, I think. That's my feeling, at least.
Yeah, no, that's a great piece of advice. Savneet?
Yeah, I was going to say that, what attracts people, what kind of art people do, um, really depends on where their own interests lie. But I see more and more people who are engaging with their own cultural heritage, especially immigrants, as a way of memory making. And
Mhm.
that while I agree with Boisali that, it's not about responsibility, it is about what really speaks to your heart. So
Yeah.
as an art therapist also, I always find that my work has a component that is about my own self-exploration as well as the cultural exploration within which I am situated. So I feel like a lot of times my art is always speaking to the tensions in my own mind as a way to ask questions. So I agree, let it come naturally. Um, make art if it truly speaks to you, if your cultural heritage is really truly speaking to you. But if it isn't, there's no push to it. But if it is, then you then come to it. It's not easy to make work around our own cultural heritage too. And
Mhm.
I say that because I know one of the artists who's in the show is here. Cynthia is here. Cynthia's piece was, I just want to give a shout out to her piece that was about her own cultural heritage that she's never made work about before. So that said, I think art making is an opportunity for us to understand ourselves. And then we decide to share it with the world. And sometimes we don't if we don't feel comfortable with it. So my little 2 cents worth.
Thank you so much, Savneet. I like this. Art making is an opportunity to understand ourselves. I saw a lot of people nodding their heads. I think we all really connected with that. Yeah. Wendy or Holly, do you want to chime in?
Well, my advice in part is sometimes you just have to take a deep breath and do it. Yes, I mean, I cut up the piece that is in this show. I just finished an entire black and white quilt and then covered it with paint. Um, So sometimes you just have to do that. I follow a couple people that have taken old finished quilts and cut them up, and they're reassembling them. They were tired of it. It didn't work. You know, even if it doesn't work, it's your quota of things that don't work, and you just keep going. And in the immortal words of Ms. Frizzle from the Magic School Bus, take chances, make mistakes, get messy.
Absolutely.
And I guess I would extend that to say sort of we're taught to use our tools in certain ways, but sometimes it's better to misuse them and to do things that they weren't intended to do.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you all so much for that. I always like to end on an advice question because sharing knowledge is a perfect way to come together in the end. You know, you never know when somebody needs to hear your words. So thank you all for sharing that. As we conclude, I just want to thank everybody for their time and for sharing your knowledge. I hope we can all walk away remembering that the work we create as artists not only reflects our own personal journeys, but also has the power to inspire and provoke dialogue, right? Which is what we're talking about today. So thank you, thank you. I'm going to do a quick shameless plug for our upcoming event. This Thursday, we're having the Letters of Solidarity event where we will write letters and donate toiletries to women experiencing incarceration. It's free and open to the public. You just have to RSVP and bring some good energy to share with those who might need it. Other than that, this recording will be uploaded on YouTube in the coming days for later watching. And in the meantime, I hope you all have a beautiful night, and I hope to see you at the gallery very soon. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you,
you.
artists. You did just a fantastic job. It was fascinating and inspiring. And Corinne, you did a great job moderating. This was so worthwhile.
Thank you, Pochis. Pochis is one of our board members. We're so happy to have her part of our team.
Yeah, I stopped by last week to see the show. It is just wonderful to see in person. I was going through the pieces and I'm like, pictures never do justice, no matter how good they are. So it
Yeah.
was a real good show. I just had little time to stop by.
Yeah, I'm sad that it has to come down. It's a
Yeah.
great show.
Can I give a shout out to a couple more artists who are here today?
Please do.
If you just raise your hand and say hello, Cynthia Kirby, Andrea Picard, Siobhan, she has her camera off. Is there anybody else that I'm missing? I think that's it.
I
So,
think that's it.
yeah. Well, thank
Yeah.
you for coming.
Thank
Yeah.
you, Sanveet, for including us. That was really humbling. Hope to meet you in person someday.
Yes, yes, absolutely. So lovely to see you all.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank
Have a great
you.
night.
Thank you,
night.
Corinne.
Thank you.
Bye.